spent the past few weeks building a new mini cruiser setup and tested quite a few variations. I'll share my experience with the deck, trucks, and wheels, so if you decide to build something similar, you'll be ahead of where I started. When building a new setup, I always like to get a rough idea of how I'll be using it, and that way it'll make it a lot easier to pick the parts. The majority of the time, I'll use it to carve mellow hills and occasionally ride in rougher terrain. I want it to be somewhat portable so I can travel with it or easily stash away. If I had to narrow it down, being able to maintain momentum and do deeper carves are probably the most important factors. I chose the Lander La Rio deck for two reasons. One, I love that it's made from recycled fishing nets. Anytime a brand can incorporate sustainability, that's beautiful. And two, it's actually a pretty functional design. The shape has a mellow concave kicktail and nose, which is comfortable for cruising. Because the edge of the rails slightly bend upward and thin out, you can get pretty beefy wheels without any riser pads. It's definitely tiny, so if you're a beginner just learning the basics, it probably doesn't make sense. It has slightly raised up circles for added grip. And to be honest, when I first stepped on it, I felt like I was for sure going to slip, but it actually has solid traction. Because the deck is mixed with glass fibers, it's sturdy, like it barely bends. If you use wheels in the 55 to 60 millimeter range, your setup will be low enough to the ground to pop the kicktail. But I still wouldn't use it in a park or for flip tricks since the kicktail angle is lower. It's functional enough to throw the occasional ollie, whether you need to get up a curb or over some rough terrain. I decided to use Polar Bear 105 millimeter traditional kingpin trucks for three reasons. One, I like how they look. Two, they're slightly lighter when compared to Paris 105s. And three, they're slightly lower to the ground. I didn't mess with the stock barrel and cone bushings, but the one thing I am gonna change are the top cup washers. They're pretty thin and can bend easily. As mentioned in the beginning, I tested a lot of variations. For context, I weigh 165 pounds if you're trying to gauge wheel bite scenarios. I started with the stock 59 millimeter Lander wheels, which are solid, but for what I was building it for, cruising mellow hills and carving, the top speed felt a little slow. Then I tested 65 millimeter, 70 millimeter, 75 millimeter, 85 millimeter, and even 100 millimeter. So here are my main takeaways. One of the things that surprised me the most about the Lander was that I didn't need any riser pads for the 65s, 70s, or even 75s. If I went super slow and searched for it, then I could get wheel bite on the 75s, but it wasn't something I was concerned about, which is pretty wild. The setup that spoke to my soul was using the 85s. Being able to maintain a ton of momentum for carving was exactly what I was searching for. They're clearly beefy boys and add a good amount of weight, so if I was in a scenario where portability is more important, I'd probably use 70 or 75s. Then of course, I had to go a little crazy and put 100s with half-inch riser pads as an all-terrain off-road setup because every once in a while I need some sketchiness in my life.